Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. So, it was already announced just now. The path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga, is the topic for our discussion today. Now, historically speaking, the classification of spiritual practices based on the diversity of human temperaments was for the first time done in the Bhagavad Gita. And Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, based on the basic human temperaments. People are frequently emotional by nature, they may be intellectual, more given to intellectual contemplation, and there are many who are active, more believing in action, pragmatism, and so on. So those who believe in action, a definite purpose, with a definite motive to achieve a definite goal, normally they have a temperament for action, for enthusiasm, efficiency, professionalism, and so on. That path can take us to God by the practice of Karma Yoga. Every action can become an act of worship, and on the one hand it helps us to succeed in our secular life. On the other hand, it also helps us to progress, to evolve in spiritual life. And there is another approach called the Jnana Yoga. There are many people who may not much believe in going to a temple or a church or a synagogue. They may want to know what is ultimate reality. They may not even be interested in praying to a God as a creator of this world. There are many such people, intellectually, logically, they at least they claim to be more advanced. They need not necessarily be so. So such people are said to practice the path of jnana, path of knowledge, jnana yoga. And then there is this Bhakti Yoga, which is more or less the path that is followed by people who believe in organized religions. In Christianity, you find the great mystics of the Middle Ages, and in Hinduism there are hundreds of saints and sages, both men and women, and you find this in very many traditions. So right now our subject for discussion is Bhakti Yoga. Now, I would like to begin with one very interesting verse from the Gita. It is the 14th verse of the 12th chapter, which is Bhakti Yoga. Santushta satadam yogi yatatma dridhanishchayeka mayyarpida mano buddhir yoman bhaktas same priya. This is the verse, a very simple verse. Shankaracharya, Madhusudan and others have elaborated on this verse, which I am not going to deal with technical subjects. But you find some very interesting aspects about it. Who is a real devotee? Interestingly, Lord Krishna says a devotee of God should be always happy. If a person tells you, I am praying to God, I am unhappy, it's an insult to God. You claim to have faith in God. We claim, I believe in God. I pray to God and I am miserable. What does it mean? It is an insult to God. So Lord Krishna says the first sign for any spiritual seeker is you should be happy. So what is that happiness? Happiness can have very many different diverse definitions and interpretations. Normally the definitions that we associate with is a kind of satisfaction. Well, I have got this, so I am happy. I don't have it, so I am unhappy. This is the normal way of understanding happiness at the empirical level, at the ordinary human interaction level. This is not the happiness that Lord Krishna is talking about. Can you be happy where you feel a kind of in a natural state of spontaneous state of inner contentment, where you feel where I am doing the right thing? So there are two types of attitudes. When you are doing something which brings contentment to you, no matter what reaction it produces to others. Others may be happy, mostly they will be happy. There may be a few who may be unhappy. But if there is an action that gives us a kind of inner contentment, mind you, not satisfaction. Even a crook can be very, very satisfied with all the criminal things. But there are spiritual seekers who do certain things and they feel that's what they ought to do, and it gives them a kind of inner contentment. Santosha samyak tushti is yasya sahasa santushta. The one who has got samyak is actually, is a upasarga. Actually means appropriate, comprehensive, proper, the right, that's what it means. So, one important sign that you are a devotee of God or you are a spiritual seeker is you will be contented. Now, again, this contentment is related to two inner mental convictions. You feel you are speaking the right word which you ought to speak, you are doing the right thing which you ought to do, you are thinking the right thought which you ought to think, and that brings good for others. At least that doesn't bring misery to others. There are many people who feel miserable when you really achieve something positive. So you can't do anything which brings empirical happiness to everyone. So there is a statement in one of our modern classics. It says, a person who deliberately tries to please everyone, either he is a crook, a rogue, or he may be saved. A great saint's actions will naturally be good for others. He may not be seeking, he may not be trying to bring deliberately through his own effort to bring some kind of happiness to others, but his actions happen to be good for others. It can't be otherwise. This is one. Then there are those who deliberately try, so that's why important point. That means those who did not, it's not the result of deliberate action done with an intention to bring some kind of external superficial happiness to others, rather is a kind of action that automatically, spontaneously happens to be good for others and good for ourselves. And when it happens to be good for others, that fact itself brings a kind of contentment to us. So Lord Krishna says the first sign of a devotee is that he should be content, happy, satisfied. This is the first word. Satatam means always. Yogi means you. Yogi is yukta, means somebody who he has connected himself to a higher transcendental spiritual goal. Now, there is a very interesting verse in one of our ancient scriptures. It's a very revealing, in fact it tells us how to confront, how to face the problems that spiritual seekers do have to face in everyday life. See, you find many great spiritual seekers, devotees and spiritual aspirants who have not done anything bad for anybody but going through unpleasant experiences. So how do you justify this? It's very interesting. You think of the innumerable saints, the Middle Ages, so great Indian spiritual sages. This is something which is not compatible. It is incompatible. On the one hand, you are a spiritual seeker, you try to do good for others. On the other hand, you have to go through unpleasant, unhappy experiences. So how do you reconcile this? So there is a verse which I shall try to explain. It is a direct message to us, all of us. Yasya anugraha vichami tasya vittam haramegam bandhavaisya viyogena vrisham bhavati dukhidaha tena dukhena samtupto yadi mamna parityaji tam prasadam karishyami yaddevairapi sudurlabha. You know, it's a very wonderful technique. If you can memorize these verses when you are very small, as I have to do from my 50 and 60-year-old words, you all these ideas, once you memorize, you can write a huge volume on this. So you don't have, it's almost like a password. The verse is simple. The poet puts an idea in the mind or in the mouth of a spiritual or in the mouth of God. God is speaking to you. What he says? Those whom I want to bless, those upon whom I want to bestow my blessings, my special favors, I take away all his wealth. The meaning is, harami means you steal. God says that the ideas are put in the mouth of God. It's a symbolic metaphor. So God tells you, if he wants to bestow his blessings on you, he turns you a pauper. And not only that, he turns all your friends against you. Or you get completely yogena. You're deserted by your close friends, your companions and friends. So, now, you can find this, as I mentioned, in the lives of great spiritual seekers, this irreconcilable contradiction. On the one hand, they are all devotees of God. On the other hand, they have to go through unpleasant experiences. Okay, now the point is, there are some people who have already done a lot of spiritual practices in their past life and who have the spiritual capacity to advance in their life, spiritual life. Still, they are not able to make enough progress. They feel. And they go through all these difficulties. They have the fact, the spiritual, these are special, let us say, they are the recipients of special grace of God. So, they can devote their whole life to God. They can lead a very complete, comprehensive spiritual life, but they get diverted by greed, by desire for wealth. So that becomes a stumbling block. They have got all the 99% mark, only one mark is left out. So what God does is, in order to complete their devotion, in order to make them more perfect, what God does is, He takes that wealth. He may be a rich man, a billionaire, so he must get so much attached to his wealth. So that attachment for wealth and money, greed, becomes the one and only remaining stumbling block or problem for him. And God has special grace for him because he has done so much of spiritual practices in the previous life. So he wants to promote him to a next stage. He wants to give him 100% mark. So he takes away his wealth. It's a test. And then there are people who are proud of their companions, seeker friends, reputation. They are very proud of it. That pride remains one stumbling block in their spiritual life. So what happens? This you may find in the lives of many spiritual seekers. You can find St. Augustine's and Francis of Assisi, there are many, and there are quite a few in see, I can give the example, maybe the most wonderful and telling example I can give is perhaps the life of Mahendranath Gupta was the one who wrote the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Actually, in the dictionary, diary, he used to go to Sri Ramakrishna every day, as far as possible. Sometimes only once a week, during weekends. He was a headmaster by profession. So he used to listen to Sri Ramakrishna. And he had a very wonderful memory. Every day he will go to his home and write down all the instructions that he received from his teacher, Sri Ramakrishna. And that became a very wonderful spiritual classic, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I had opportunities, occasions to give talks, classes in many of the seminaries in India, Catholic seminaries. And the state I am coming from has got many ancient seminaries established 8th century, 9th century, 80s. Christians were there for a long time. You'll be surprised. Okay, now, I have not come across a single Catholic seminary, major seminary, where they didn't have a copy of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna in English. So, it is a book that is read and studied by Christian clergymen in India. So those who are coming from Calcutta, Chandanagar, the French seminary, you find it. It's a classic. Now what about the life of this man? He was, in many ways he was a highly accomplished person, a very highly educated person, very good reputation as a headmaster, and he had wonderful students. In fact, many of Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples were his students, and it was he who sent them to Sri Ramakrishna, who led, and they all became, many of them became Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples, famous Swamis. But this man's life was something very interesting. So you can imagine a very successful, a very highly educated headmaster. When you read his book, you find he was so well versed in the biblical literature, Western philosophy, in English language, of course Sanskrit language, of course, and therefore his own mother tongue, Indian vernacular. But this man's life had one problem. He could not sleep properly because his family members were always quarreling. Large family. He was not poor, but he was not very affluent. So they were all fighting and quarreling. That's the only problem he had. Wonderful reputation, everyone respected him in society. He was one of the elite of Calcutta city at that time. He had many wonderful, well-reputed people among his friends. But his family life was unpleasant. So one night, about 10:30 at night, he left his home. His plan was to commit suicide. That's the story. And his wife also accompanied him, travelled in a hackney carriage around the city of Calcutta, reached a place, and he thought he had a wonderful friend. And he reached the friend's home with his wife. The friend was not amused if somebody knocks on your door at midnight. Your own friend, accompanied by his wife, and not without any previous notice. So he didn't get a very warm reception. Because he was broken heart. He left that place and wandered around, and finally, past midnight, he reached the home of his nephew and stayed there for a few days. After 3-4 days, his nephew happened to ask him, there is a saint who is living in a temple on the banks of river Ganga. Would you like to go and see him? So Yam, that is a short name by which he was known, he happened to follow his nephew, Siddheshwar Majumdar was his name, and reached the temple. There he happened to stand for some time in front of the door where Sri Ramakrishna was talking about God. Once he listened for a few minutes, he entered, but that was not the right occasion. He came out, he went out, but again he came back, and after that, his life underwent a complete transformation. So the man who wanted to put an end to his life got a new life. Now the question is, Bhadvaischa viyogena. So, even when you are completely deserted by your own close friends, you have lost money which you liked, which you are attached to much, your friends upon whom you had so much of faith suddenly showed a real face, then suddenly the idea that God is the only true, permanent and reliable friend, that fact is brought home in a very unpleasant, shocking language. So, the statement the sloga which I quoted says, even when you have lost all the wealth that you are attached to, and when you are deserted by your own close friends and others upon whom you fully rely upon, still if you don't lose faith in God, then God gives a reward to you. He elevates you to such a high level that you will be an envy to angels. That Devaira means I shall elevate them to such a high spiritual status that they will be, that even gods here means angels will be jealous of you because God will elevate you to such a position. So obstacles are only pathways, springboards, opportunities for us to go ahead in spiritual life. Remember, this is true of the highest devotees. It doesn't mean that every problem is an opportunity, so we should sleep over the problem. Not at all. We should not deceive ourselves. What it means is problems, obstacles, difficulties, all these can be easily managed when we change the priority of things that we value in life. When we bring into our life a higher spiritual ideal, that it's not that all the problems are solved, but rather we learn to look upon our problems from a different perspective. That is an important point to remember. In this Sandushta Sadhavam Yogi Yathatma Didadische, there are a few qualifications again Lord Krishna says. In this in the Bhagavad Gita, the characteristics of an ideal devotee, that's the subject of discussion here. He should be a person of strong determination. So a devotee should be naturally in a state of spontaneous happiness and joy. Again, it is not empirical worldly joy or happiness. It is something that goes beyond worldly joys and happiness. Now, for that, you need a few qualifications. You should have a strong power of determination, a steely heart. That's also very, very, very interesting. A devotee of God cannot be weak because we listen to many ideas. We may happen to associate with many undesirable companions. All of them may bring poisonous ideas, negative ideas, wrong ideas, ideas that may shake our conviction, take us away from our path. But still, in spite of all that, in spite of all these possibilities, if we can keep our mind steady and stable, then only you can be an ideal devotee. So you can find in the Bhagavad Gita, you should be always in a state of internal, inherent joy. So joy is our true nature. Misery is a foreign entity. Misery is alien to our true nature. Joy, santosha is the word used in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Somebody who is a inner deep-rooted contentment. When that contentment comes, your conviction cannot be shaken. I have come across many people who sometimes get their convictions, their faith devastated, sometimes shaken by wrong associations, wrong ideas. Suddenly they become, sometimes people come to Vedanta society. After some time you won't see them again for a long time. So again they will come back. So This you find in spiritual life. Frequently, when we pray in the temple or in church, we are happy. But when we are away from the temple and church, then we feel our mind is changing. So this is like a pendulum of a clock. It moves in one direction, then it moves in the opposite direction. It is called Vikshittam, and the mind is always like a pendulum moving from one end to the other end. It doesn't remain steady in the middle. When we read a book, when you listen to a great idea, when you pray or when you recite your prayers or when you closely associate with devotees, you feel so okay. But then again in workplace, in our ordinary life situations, suddenly we feel we are away from it. Again, next week when we go to temple or a church, again that higher idea comes back. But again disappears. This is natural. So that's why Lord Krishna says, to be an ideal devotee, you should have a strong determination. In spiritual life, a strong determination is more necessary than in professional life. Because the challenges that we face in spiritual life come from a source which is not visible to us. It is from our own mind. And also, the way we listen, the way we respond to negative ideas, undesirable ideas coming from undesirable sources, that also can shake our conviction, take the mind away from one end to the other end. So that is why one should have a very, very steady mind. See, you can find all the great spiritual teachers, founders of world religions. But you can take Buddha, Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Jesus, take any of the great saints, Middle Ages, or spiritual seekers, what all difficulties they have to go through. Sometimes people may come, oh, it doesn't make any sense. You need not believe. Conviction is broken. What happens? All the money you are saving in the bank balance collapses. So, in order that the banks do not collapse, means spiritual bank balance that we create in our name should not be lost, should not be frittered away by wrong associations or by having negative ideas. So, how to fight negativity? For that, we need Yatatman Dridhanste, means your mind should be strong and stable. So a person who has this inner spiritual contentment, the contentment that I am a devotee of God. So there is nothing higher than being a devotee of God. So that should give us a tremendous sense of inner satisfaction, contentment. But then, see, goodness without strength is no good. Goodness and strength should come together. Strength means the strength of mental, strength of mind, the power of determination, strength of mind. So any amount of goodness, unless it has hands and feet, it cannot function in our life. It will be of no use to us. So Lord Krishna says, Santushta Satam Yogi, a devotee of God should be proud, should be happy that I am a devotee of God. That in fact, Sri Ramakrishna, says, you are a devotee of God, so nothing can happen to us. That is it's not arrogance, I remember. It is not arrogance. It is natural pride. Once you have this pride, say this pride and determination, then you will evolve to stage where you don't need this pride. You need spiritual pride. Without spiritual pride, you will be able to preserve your spiritual characteristics. A small plant need a good fence around. Otherwise, the cattle will come and eat it again. You cannot stand. When it becomes a big tree, you can tie a big elephant on it. No problem. So, at the beginning of spiritual life, we must have strong determination and a positive spiritual pride. So think of Jesus Christ or Buddha, he didn't take anybody. Not the problems. In fact, you find spiritual seekers have more problems, in fact, from one perspective. When we look at their life, if you see Jesus Christ, not a very happy situation to be forced to walk in the street with a heavy cross on your shoulders and being beaten by the Roman soldiers. Not a very, you won't like to exchange your position with his. Not a very happy situation. Buddha. Or Sri Ramakrishna, he had to face a lot of difficulties. All these great men and women, not tradition you find. But the point is, it is not a problem for them from their perspective. When we look at their life from our perspective, you feel this a kind of incompatibility. That means, on the one hand, they are spiritual seekers. On the other hand, they go through these unpleasant experiences. Unpleasant not for them, for us. So that's why Lord Krishna says, a spiritual seeker, a devotee of God, should consider the joy and happiness, contentment, not in the worldly sense, but the happiness and contentment that you get when you consider yourself to be a devotee of God. That is the first characteristic of an ideal devotee. And he says, Santushta Sadam Yogi Dharma Dhanasega Mayapida Mano Buddhi Yogan Bhakta Samepriya. Again, very interesting. Why he is so proud? He is so proud because his mind is given to God. So when a person feels that his mind is given to God, then mentally he will be living in a higher ideal. Such a devotee is near to me. This is the subjective picture of an ideal devotee. So we should remember very well, in order to really experience this, we must be able to look upon problems from a different perspective. So if God has a special favor for you, if He has a special consideration for you, then He may give you a few troubles, difficulties. So that you exercise your mind, your devotion, while confronting these problems, you become grace worthy. God's grace is of no use to you, to us, unless we are worthy by grace. See, I gave this example some time back. Unless our mind is ready, God's grace, we may not recognize God's grace as God's grace. We may misinterpret it as an accident, frequently as we do. So, then the verse continues, Yasmanu dijade loku lokanu dijade jayana harsamasu mayodyogi muktoya sachame priya. Another interesting characteristic. How a devotee is looked upon by others and how a devotee of God should look upon others. An ideal devotee of God is not worried. He is not afraid of anybody and nobody is afraid of him. He doesn't agitate anybody and he is not agitated by anything or anybody. Okay, now this is again built upon the solid foundation of this contentment which I mentioned earlier. Contentment, that's very important. Once we are fully convinced, when we are taking a decision to take spiritual life, when we start spiritual endeavor, then we feel this inner contentment. Here I must give you a few important indications in this context. When we take a spiritual life, when we seriously take spiritual life, you find, as I mentioned earlier, mind doesn't remain steady. So when we are reading a scripture, we are very happy. When we are in the temple or the church, when we are praying, we are happy. But when we are in the workplace, when we are in the business world, our mind is different. This contradiction is there. Now, the point is, when we take to spiritual life, you find our mind begins to evolve. Even when you go to a university library and you read a very good spiritual classic for 1 hour, even that experience can bring about some change, because it can bring some new ideas that will enrich our mind. But then those ideas do not remain there for long. They are not lost completely, but their influence so slowly fades away. And again, when we read that book or when we listen to a spiritual idea, again the idea with the old memory will come back to us. So what happens is, when we take to any spiritual endeavor, a second personality emerges. A higher personality slowly begins to emerge in front of us. It's something, a higher you, which is far superior to the present you. A higher goal, higher spiritual aspiration slowly emerges. And along with that, there is a higher secondary personality that emerges in the mental horizon. But it is weak, its voice is very weak. We forget that, and again we come back to usual business when we leave the temple, when we leave the church, when we are not engaged in spiritual activity. So as we intensify and dedicate more and more time for devotional practices, this higher personality grows and becomes stronger and stronger. This higher personality is what we want to be. That's our goal. Want to make progress in spiritual life. But there is something that tries to pull you down. That is the older personality, the personality of our normal habits that we have been doing for the last several years, for the past several years. So when you try to evolve a spiritual personality, when we try to practice a spiritual sadhana, this higher secondary personality emerges. As we intensify, the lower personality fades away and the higher personality becomes stronger and stronger. This is explained in the light of a very interesting imagery in one of the Upanishad Vedantic texts. It's the name of an imagery. The imagery is that of a tree with two branches, one above, the other below. There is a bird sitting on the branch above and another bird sitting below. Both are identical, they look alike, same color, same species, same size, they look alike, almost identical. Dva suparna soija sakhaya samanam duksham parishusujade tayoranya piparamtu swadati anasnat nanyo apichapasi. In the Buddha Upanishad comes. So two birds, but they are identical, but there is one difference. The bird sitting above is sitting calm and quiet and serene. It is untouched by the problems of the world. It is always happy, santushta, an ideal devotee of God. The bird below is what we are right now. So the bird below, it's not keeping quiet, it's not sitting quiet. It goes on eating fruits. And all the fruits are not sweet. Some fruits are sour. As in life, we have to go through sweet experiences and also sour experiences. Good and bad, painful and pleasant experiences. So when we go through pleasant experiences, we become happy. When we go through unpleasant experiences, we become unhappy. The bird, when he eats sweet fruits, is very happy. He's always looking for fruits. And all the fruits are not sweet. When he eats sour fruits, he becomes terribly unhappy. But slowly the bird evolves. He climbs to the top branch. Through spiritual practices, by reading, contemplation, prayer, meditation, taking God's name, and so on, all the spiritual practices. Slowly the bird moves upward. And when it reaches the top branch, suddenly it realizes we are the same. So our true nature is that we are joy, happiness, contentment is our true nature. But for that you should be like the bird sitting above, because it is not seeking sweet fruits, so it doesn't have to eat sour fruits. What does it mean? If when we link our life to God, what happens? This higher personality evolves and we develop a new mind, and that mind can look upon happiness and unhappiness with the same equanimity of mind, without any change. Once we understand that life is full of sweet fruits and also bitter fruits, then we won't be shocked when we have to eat bitter fruits, because we understand it's part of life. We cannot always have sweet fruits. How do we do this? When we link ourselves to this spiritual idea by prayer, meditation, and so on. This can be done by anybody. At the highest level, God or spirituality becomes a part of daily life. It is not something that we practice only when we meditate, only when we pray. It is something that we practice even when we are working in the office, in the factory, in the business, anyway. So, for such a devotee, every moment is an occasion for celebration. Nityotsavam bhavatyesha nityasri nityam, first in the Bhagavad Gita. Means for an ideal devotee, whole life is a very wonderful occasion for pure, undiluted contentment and joy and happiness. Because the bird sitting above is not unhappy because it is not looking for happiness. It is not looking for happiness. And certainly nobody will look for unhappiness. So when we understand and realize the reality that life cannot always be full of sweet fruits only, and when we realize that if we look for sweet fruits, we can't escape the fate of having to eat bitter fruits occasionally. Once we understand, then we are able to look upon the bitter fruits as something not bitter. So that's why Lord Krishna says that devotee should be always happy, joyful and content. And then it is not something that we get, that's our true nature. When we are miserable, that is something that we get from outside. Unhappiness is alien to our true nature. Happiness and joy in the true spiritual sense of that word is our true nature. But remember, that's why very interesting, many of these spiritual classics are so realistic. They tell you very clearly, we should be able to look upon ourselves as a devotee of God. That's on the one hand. Second hand, then how do we live in this world? How do we interact with people in the workplace, in the office, in factory, in different places? We come across people who are not always spiritual seekers. There are, of course, very rarely do we come across spiritual seekers in professional life. And there also the devotional scriptures lay down some very interesting practical points. Says, when we meet people who are spiritual seekers, we must have a natural affinity with them. Because when devotees converge together, our spiritual life is strengthened, enriched, is promoted. But again, Lord Krishna is saying you should have a strong will. No weak person can be devotee of God. In fact, for spiritual life, you need much more mental strength than the mental strength or determination necessary to be a successful CEO. Because the later situation, the challenges are more visible, tangible. And the solutions are also more or less obvious and visible, tangible. But into the spiritual life, we must have a strong dudha. That's why Santushta, the devotee, should be always contented. But it's not superficial and happy, superficial happiness or joy. It is based on the true, unshakable conviction that we are devotees of God. That's why in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you find Sri Rama say, I have taken the name of God, what can happen to me? It's not arrogance. That kind of arrogance is good, it's a tonic. Where I am devotee of God. I am a spiritual. I am in the protection of God. Then what can happen to me? So, this is not arrogance. In fact, this pride is a healthy pride. In fact, this is the evolution of ego. It is the first example of positive sublimation of our ego. Ego can be a terrible problem. Many people, sometimes I have seen this happening. People, oh, he is very egoistic. It's a very, very superficial statement. Some people make, he is very egoistic. You find certain people who are very egoistic and they will be doing a lot of good work. Apparently, we often accuse them of being egoistic. But you find many of them doing wonderful work. Good for others, good for themselves. If you observe what they are doing, you find they only do good for others. They won't do anything that hurts others. But apparently, if you observe their behavior, they appear to be a bit egoistic. Actually, it's an example of sublimation, refinement of ego, purification of ego. From that stage, we shall reach the next stage where you are good, you good for work for others without this spiritual ego. So spiritual ego is the only way to transcend ego. Spiritual ego is a royal pathway. And the spiritual ego means I am a devotee of God. That's what Lord Krishna says. One should have a strong determination, strong resolution. From such a person, nobody is agitated by such a person. Tulyanindas tudir mavani santushto yena kena. You find in Gita, it goes so Lord Krishna continues. Such a devotee, he is not shocked, he is not affected, he is not devastated mentally when somebody criticizes him. And he doesn't feel flattered when somebody praises them. Because if you are looking for flattery, then you will end up facing criticism. Because you won't find everyone flattering. So one should look beyond both. So, in fact, spiritual life, the life of a devotee is a very, very realistic and also very idealistic. A transcendental faith in God enables us to live in this world of everyday life situations in a very intelligent, very effective manner. Now we will have interaction. We will go to
question. So when Thakur was doing his sadhana, he was not in a very content mood. He was continuously striving to get the vision of Mother. So when Gita says that he will be in the content mood, it has to be after the realization.
Yeah, when you see Yoman Bhakta Sajame prayer, a devotee of the highest type, Sri Ramakrishna was going through different stages. If you read Sri Ramakrishna's life, if you read Swami Sharadananda's exhaustive biography, you find Sri Ramakrishna in his devotional life went through all these stages. He went through all these stages. Another very interesting thing which I want to mention is when a devotee of God feels restlessness for God's grace, that restlessness doesn't make him unhappy the way we understand unhappiness. And that's a very interesting point. See, that is called Parinama Dukkha in the Yoga Sutra tradition. Parinama Tapasamskara Dukkhehi Gunavisheshacha Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekinaga. See, when I read this sutra in the Yoga Sutra, what it means is this higher discontentment is actually, it's not something that makes you miserable. It actually propels you to move forward in the devotional life. So that's a very interesting, remember. See, I can see the contrast. A person who has lost money, or maybe somebody near and dear passed away, crying and weeping. See, that kind of unhappy, painful situation is different from from the restlessness you feel for a vision of God or realization of God or God's grace. It's totally different. Rather, this discontentment for higher spiritual progress has in it an element of blessedness. That's an important point. The restlessness or the discontentment associated with the spiritual sadhanas of a spiritual seeker have in it an element of blessedness, which is not there when you are crying and weeping for money or that you lost or something tragic. It's something that makes you fatigued, tired and exhausted. Here, mind is not tired, body may be. Mind is always focused on something higher. That's one. Secondly, so even when you are going through the preliminary stages, the early stages of spiritual life, when you feel this restlessness, even in that restlessness, there is an element of spiritual blessedness. One thing. Second, when Sri Ramakrishna reached the highest state of spiritual progress, then you find, so he himself said, his room was a source of joy and happiness, a mart of joy. That's how it's called. So that's an important point, remember. So this is not often recognized by us. The discontentment or the unhappiness that we feel when we feel that we are not making enough spiritual progress, that discontentment is totally different from the miserable feeling of unhappiness and pain that we feel when we lose something precious. It's better to sublimate the one for the other. That's why. So see, let's look at Buddha. Buddha's life was like no problem. Till 28 years, he had a wonderful life. No problem. Then why did he walk 1200 miles all the way from Lumbini to Kapilavastu to Bodhi and sat under the tree? He saw the face of a sick man, an old man, and a dead person. So these three visions made him unhappy. But that unhappiness made him Buddha. Unhappiness doesn't make everyone a Buddha. Really, it doesn't happen. Unhappiness breaks our nerves, makes us fatigued and tired and exhausted. And even if it weakens our memory, it weakens our conviction. There's an important point. Unhappiness doesn't give you any kind of joy. But Buddha was not unhappy in that sense. After all, he was not old or sick or he was not dead. But these problems which humanity confronts, which is part of human life, that made him a philosopher. So he wanted to know the truth behind it. You see, so he became Buddha eventually. Come.
That example of the two birds, upper bird and the lower bird.
Yeah.
How does that apply to Bhakti Yoga?
Yeah. That the ascent of the bird of the lower branch, moving forward, that is sadhanas in the Bhakti tradition. Follow. Because Tulyavinda Sudhir Mauni, the ability to go beyond good and bad, the ability to look upon good and bad, pain and pleasure with the same equanimity of mind, without being shocked by pain, without being unnecessarily exalted by happy experiences. So, that is the picture of the bird sitting above, which is not eating anything. So the spiritual practices, prayers, meditation, japa, all these are sadhanas which correspond to the lower bird slowly climbing up till reach the branch above. And then it realizes, actually we are the same. But not before it reaches there. So spiritual practices. That's why spiritual practices, devotional practices should give us an attitude, a positive spiritual attitude and spiritual philosophy. That's a thrust of this verse. So devotion is not just shout, nothing wrong in it, shouting kirtans and jumping, that's fine. In fact, that is good, that's better than doing nothing. When you go to kindergarten, small children have to write their alphabet in a big letter. That's what they can't write in small little things. So the beginning of spiritual life is called Vaidhi Bhakti, mechanical practice. That's good. That's needed. You have to go to kindergarten when you are small. So like that, a lot of shouting, lot of japa, making your devotion felt and visible to everyone. Nothing, in fact, is not wrong. But if you see that's the highest thing, then you are wrong. That's all. Kindergarten is not the end of education. It helps us because our natural tendency to shout, to act, and to move, and to be physical, to be active, are given a spiritual orientation when you shout, let us say, stotras, when you jump, uttering stotras, that's fine. So natural human faculties and activities are given a spiritual orientation by this, but that's not the end of the journey. So that's called the mechanical bhakti, Vaidhi Bhakti, mechanical, every day morning getting up, extra time meditation, japa, that's fine. You need to do that because that's how you begin. But if there are people, there's always a problem. The problem in devotional life is we often look upon kindergarten as Harvard. So it's not like a military barracks. Every day you get at a fixed time, 5 o'clock, then japa for half an hour or 1 hour, and then do this, then in the world, then coming back again devotion like that. The problem is you may get stuck there when you look upon this as the end. A child thinking this is the end of education. But then it is necessary. People who don't think of any of these spiritual ideas, they should begin by first, every day morning I will do this 5 to 5:30. Evening 7 to 7:30. It's fine. So that's interesting. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, Lord.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very wonderful.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
You have another question?
So Thakur used to love kirtan and all these things, and he used to go and dance also
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's true. Sri Ramakrishna's dance, his kirtan, that he used to forget himself. He practically lost his consciousness when his mind completely merged in that devotion, that hymns, that's true. And after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, Swamiji was training his disciples. Then he found some devotees were imitating Sri Ramakrishna, and they were doing rehearsal also under closed doors, and imitating samadhi, contemplation. Then Swamiji makes fun, and he actually called them bluff on a few occasions. You reading Swamiji's life, so that's why even in spiritual science, you don't condemn anything and you don't say this is bad or good, nothing. You don't, when a student goes to primary school, you don't tell him, oh, you should go to Harvard or Oxford instead of going to the primary school. You don't say that. He has to work hard as a student in the primary school, then only he will be able to go to higher universities one day. But for Sri Ramakrishna, for him, samadhi, kirtan, everything was same. All reached the highest peak. If you read the life, you will find it. When those who have read Sri Ramakrishna's life, they will find this. Any more?
Swamiji, I'll seek a clarification. You mentioned in the beginning of the talk that when there are some elements left in a spiritual seeker's life, whether it's wealth or pride, right, then God takes that away so that from 99% we can get to 100%. And I know many of us, we face situations in life like when you lose a job or there could be elements. The one view you can take is that, hey, this is God's gift to me that I lost my job so that I can transcend. So I just wanted your clarification on that. How should we approach?
Yeah, actually, this was the example. This verse comes in the context of explaining as a response to a question asked, explaining this paradox of great spiritual teachers, spiritual seekers going through unpleasant experiences. So how can these two go together? You are a devotee of God, and in real life you go through many of these experiences. So one of the Rishi referring to this says, for these great spiritual seekers, these are not problems. They look upon this as different ways of tests. Okay, now if you read the writings of St. John of Cross, or maybe much more than that, the autobiographical writings of St. Teresa of Avila, you find she had to go through a lot of such difficulties. So she looks upon all those as different ways in which God was testing her will. So that's how, for her it was not a problem. For others, observing her experiences, it was a problem. That's an important point. Thank you. So next we will, I want to wind up this in 2 more sessions. I think 2 more sessions. So 1 more session, only 1 more, I believe.
I'll have to check.
Anyway, next we will discuss the path of knowledge. As I mentioned, all these yogas are meant for different spiritual seekers of different temperaments. So there are people, in fact, path of knowledge, if you study this, you will find even those who do not fall into the category of traditional religious people. Even those who have some sense of quest for truth can find wonderful ideas in the path of Jnana Yoga. That's what we are going to discuss, Jnana Yoga. The path of knowledge and the path of contemplation. We will see. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Paramastu